It's time for another crossover edition. Locked on Packers, Locked on Steelers. I'm Peter Bukowski. Joining me is my friend Chris Carter. And Chris, we have a matchup that I think before the season maybe looked a little juicier than it does now.
To say the least.
Part of that is because each of these teams has decided to lay at least one egg so far this season. But there's still plenty of reason of optimism for both teams, I think. Let's start here with Pittsburgh. And I think the looming question, this is something that you and I talked about on Locked On Today, is this question about what's going on with Ben Roethlisberger. So I'll ask you again, what's going on with Ben Roethlisberger?
Well, for the uninitiated of daily Ben Roethlisberger talk here in Pittsburgh, what's been going on is that Ben has really struggled in these first few games. I mean, he's not throwing the ball deep and over the middle. And what's crazy is, like, and Steelers fans have brought this up, is like, like what happened to the offense that we saw in the preseason when they took on the Detroit Lions. And yes, it was preseason, it was Detroit Lions, but he was throwing in the middle of the field and like he looked much more comfortable. Like the timing was there, just throwing the ball and like everything was fine. Now it's like they have the heat when he has the time, he's still not making the throws, he's not making the right reads, and everything's out of rhythm right now. It's kind of gotten to the point where it's becoming a question. There's a lot of people in Pittsburgh saying, oh, should they just move on and do Mason Rudolph and just think that's the best shot? The Steelers won't do that because they don't think Mason really gives them much that Ben doesn't right now. But I think right now the main question is, can Ben Roethlisberger settle down and get back to reading defenses? Peter, everyone's going to talk about his arm. I don't think his arm's the problem. When he's throwing some deep balls, it's either getting there or it's just missing. But the biggest problem is that like he's not able to process and consistently hit those 10, 15-yard routes where like Juju breaks into the open part of a zone defense and he's like unsure of when he's supposed to throw that. And that's been the biggest issue, is mentally. And they need that. They need him to get past that, because this is not an offense with Antonio Brown to pick it up and he can just heave it to him and get it done. Najee Harris is a playmaker, but they need a little bit of balance so that defenses can't just pay attention to him. The offensive line they knew would struggle, but Ben Roethlisberger they were hoping would be at least somewhat of a cerebral quarterback, and he hasn't been that early on.
Yeah, I was just looking up the next gen stats on their completion percentage above expectation. The worst quarterbacks in the league right now, Justin Fields is at the bottom of the list. Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Tua, and Ben.
Not a great company to keep.
No, not ideal. So when you're looking at, okay, if this is the plan, this is the formula for getting things on track. Is it, okay, we need to try and find the way, whether it's hard play action to create shot plays, or is it we're just going to have to live in this world where Ben is getting the ball out quicker? He just has to be more decisive, which of course, he's a veteran quarterback. It's not like he's a rookie and he can't process the field. It doesn't seem like he's playing with confidence right now. So how do they fix that? How do they find some rhythm here?
It's going to be kind of what they've done in years past. Because here's the thing, this isn't new. Like, we've seen years where Ben Roethlisberger's just been like, yeah, I'm throwing it over there. He's like, it's kind of been, and I think what kind of masked it at times was he had Antonio Brown to save him for so many years. Mm-hmm. And again, I know some Steelers fans are like, Chris, you're turning on Ben. I'm like, listen, guys, I'm very neutral on Ben Roethlisberger. I respect him a ton. I think he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. But when it comes to honestly assessing his bad days, there's been plenty of games. Like there was a game where they beat the Chiefs years ago. I think it was a 2016 or 27. I think it was 2017. And but it was on a fluke play where he threw it. It should have been picked. Antonio Brown snatched it out of the air and ran it to the end zone. There's been several plays like that over his career where he had that superstar receiver saving him, or Le'Veon Bell saving him. I think now it's in a point where, and then eventually what happens is he wakes back up, finds whatever rhythm he needs to be in, and then he starts making the throws that are like, okay, that's prime Ben Roethlisberger. But he's been in those ruts, and the problem is he's in a rut right now, and it doesn't look like he's getting out of it. I will say that it looked like he was out of that rut early and going into the middle part of last season. And then whatever happened late in last season, he kind of fell back into it where he wasn't seeing the field, wasn't paying attention to what the rotating safeties were doing. And that's led to problems. So can he overcome it? He's going to have to. Otherwise, they're going to be like, well, you know what? I think if he can't overcome this by a few more weeks, that's when they have to ask serious questions. Is like, listen, if you can't just be a veteran quarterback and just make the consistent throws that an NFL quarterback's supposed to make, what's the point?
Right. The offensive line is a big part of this too, because in the offseason, there was a lot of discussion. What is the future of the offensive line? We have the somewhat surprising decision by David DeCastro to retire. And then they go out and they use their first round pick on Najee Harris. We don't need to adjudicate the offensive line versus running back part of this, but where is this offensive line right now? Because they're also dealing with some injuries as well.
Well, the offensive line is, still struggling. Center Kendrick Green, looks strong at times, but also looks weak at times. And he's trying to find himself. Remember, he played guard most of his time at Illinois. That was an adjustment he's been making. But Mike Tomlin, I think, described it best in his Tuesday press conference. He called it popcorn with the run game. Sometimes you'll get 4 guys blocking the right way and 1 guy missing, and it's all over. Sometimes you'll have 5 guys blocking the right way and Najee misses the hole. And it's just been thing after thing that's kind of blown up the efforts that the Steelers have put together to be successful in the run game. It just hasn't happened for them yet. And I think that's their biggest struggle right now. The biggest thing that I always push back on when people go into the running back versus offensive line situation, I would have agreed if we were talking Penei Sewell, though he's not playing well right now, or if we were talking Christian, what was it, Rashawn Slater and Christian Darrisaw. Almost made it Christian Slater. That would have been a whole different person.
I don't think he'd be a good offensive lineman.
No, that's not. You got to have Rashawn or Christian. Yeah, that doesn't work, man. It'd be a whole other person. But if we were talking one of those guys, different story. But if you look at the next 5 offensive linemen, like Liam Eichenberg and like the guys that came after that, either they're not starting, hurt, or they're playing and they're playing poorly.
Right.
Like the guys that they had at that point that were available to them, they weren't there. And so they said, you know what, let's get the best running back on the board. And I still think that he's a key to the success. I brought this up on Locked On Now. For me, a huge key to beating the Bengals was getting him going in the passing game so the offensive line didn't have to worry about it. But the follow-up was when the Bengals started to see that you were throwing it to him, throw behind him and then make them put them into a guessing game. Ben Roethlisberger never did that. And I think that's the biggest problem there. But for the run game, Mike Tomlin, he's not hitting any panic buttons yet. He thinks that this group can figure it out eventually. And again, I think they got an athletic group. I think they got a physical group. They're just not a coordinated group. And that's going to be the question is how long does it take for them to find that coordination?
Yeah, we spent more time on the offense because the defense is a much more known quantity. We know this defense is nails. And they can really rush the passer. They've got multiple guys that they can throw at you. Minkah Fitzpatrick is the preeminent back-end defender in football right now, as good as anyone in the league at creating turnovers and creating indecision for opposing quarterbacks. But TJ Watt dealing with an injury, dealing with that groin injury coming off the monster historic extension that he signed and then had to go work out right after. So what is TJ Watt's status and how critical is he to how good this defense would be in a game like this?
Well, he was limited practice on Wednesday. I was there watching, and we're not allowed to say what we see, but we're allowed to say what the injury report says. Those typical NFL rules. But I will say, the expectation is for both him and Alex Highsmith to be back. It's crazy that week 1 game against Buffalo. Everyone's like, oh, I guess that was just a fluke game. I'm like, I don't think it was a fluke game as much as far as they had their whole defense that game, minus Stephon Tuitt. But in the Raiders game, the day of, they thought they were going to get Devin Bush and Joe Hayden. Both of them end up not being able to play. Then they lose TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Tyson Olulu during the game. That's 5 defensive starters, 4 of which are in your front 7, and that's the group that makes the money for the Steelers. So that was a big problem. And then you saw against the Bengals, Melvin Ingram played 100% of the snaps. That was never the plan with Melvin Ingram in this game. But it looks like all indications say that all those guys should be back. The same thing goes for Deontay Johnson. He was able to practice in a limited fashion on Wednesday. Unless there's a setback later in the week, that would be the turnaround. But as far as how it looks, it looks like most guys will be back. The only people that don't look like they might be back are still Chukwuma Okorafor, who's in concussion protocol, the starting right tackle. But Zach Banner, the team's, the guy who's supposed to be the starting right tackle, he has been activated. They have 21 days to officially add him to the active roster now, but he's back, trying to work his way back from injured reserve, putting the pads on and working out with the team again. So there's definitely a sign that maybe they get a lot more healthy guys back this week, or if not this week, the week after.
All right, a lot more here to come on this crossover edition for Week 4 Packers Steelers. Before we get there, I want to tell you about an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. My listeners are making up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. If you have a big tank like I do, that's a lot of money potentially. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use the promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents cash back per gallon on your first tank. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, to PayPal, e-gift card for Amazon, other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get that 50% per gallon cash back on your first tank. That's code TOUCHDOWN, and the app is Get Upside. All right, Chris, let's flip the script here. I'm gonna put the bright lights on me and give you the floor.
Well, so good. Thank you for doing so, Peter. But everyone wants to know, man. First of all, well, before we get to the matchup stuff, what was your interpretation of Aaron Rodgers going on Pat McAfee and saying all these really good Pittsburgh things? Because listen, we have a guy, Josh Axelrod from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He comes on the show. He's been pounding the table. I mean, pounding the table for Aaron Rodgers to go to Pittsburgh in 2022. When people hear that in Packerville, is there a sense of like, hey, Aaron, why are you saying these things, man? Like, just leave it alone.
I would say generally there is a sense of that, and I would have to say I am someone who's like, do you need to answer every question every time that someone asks about the offseason? Do we need to talk about it? Like, right. How do we at a certain point can we just put this behind us? Now, the other part of this is Pat is a Yinzer, right?
Yeah,
totally. He is a Pennsylvania guy. And so he is going to push all the buttons, and Aaron Rodgers knows exactly what he's doing when he does that. Also, I do think that his respect for the Pittsburgh organization is real. Mm-hmm. And he's talked about it in the past. He is a student of the game. He's someone who respects the history, the ownership group there. I think Mike Tomlin is, other than like Bill Belichick and Andy Reid, I don't know that there's any coach in the league who is better respected from other players on other teams than Mike Tomlin. And so I think that's part of it too. And let's be honest, there are a lot of similarities between the Steelers and the Packers in terms of fan support, in terms of their belovedness in the community, all that stuff. I mean, it would be easy if you're Aaron Rodgers to say, okay, I don't think it's working out in Green Bay anymore. Where can I go that is the closest, most reasonable facsimile for this and have a team that's ready to go? Pittsburgh has not been mentioned a bunch, but if you look at the receivers, now, the future of Juju, we don't know what that is, but they've got the defense that Green Bay has really not had in years. They've got playmakers. They've got the weapons. Now, the offensive line, obviously a big question mark there. It would certainly be a good landing spot for Aaron Rodgers. And there's a long way to go. I think Packer fans would rather talk about the potential for Packers Steelers at the end of the season, or at least a repeat of the last time they played in the postseason, and then we'll go from there, Chris. But I do understand why that question is being asked, because he was effusive in his praise for Pittsburgh. And I have to say, I've been to Pittsburgh a couple times. It's a beautiful city, and I did not know before I came what a beautiful city it is. It's a gorgeous place. The food is wonderful. The people are great. What's not to love?
If you ever come by, you just got. I will hook you up on where to go. Ask James Rapine or your boy Q. I've hooked them both up on their trips to Pittsburgh. Now, I want to dive into more about Aaron Rodgers himself, and I wanted to start it off light with that question. But is Aaron
not light for my listeners, Chris?
right. They're like, hey, Chris, you're stressing us out, man. But with Aaron Rodgers and this offense, one thing that we've always seen is, Aaron, there's times he can be more of a gunslinger. There's times he could be more of like one of the best processors of the field. Where do you think he is right now? That first game, everyone was like, oh, is he done? Is he over the hill? And then of course, the next two games, he's absolutely not. But what's your interpretation of where he is in his career?
So here's what I'll say. After the first game, my concern with the Packers offense and with Aaron Rodgers in particular is you go through this bizarre offseason. Who knows what's real and what's not, right? we're still sort of sifting through all of that. And I do think it's funny, he goes in his press conferences, the media likes to make stuff up as he's reciting chapter and verse, all the things that was reported all offseason and confirming all of those things. But that is a different story for a different day. And he comes in and we don't know what his mindset is. We don't know if he's truly all in. We just don't know, right? He says he is, but you still got to go out on the field and prove it after as wild an offseason as we had. There just is no way to truly know, right? So he goes out and is not playing on time. He's forcing balls into areas that we just don't normally see him force. I mean, the shot play interception to Marquez Valdes-Scantling when it's dead, and it's like, why? And I guess he said, we're down. I'm just trying to, make a play. And so I think there were questions to say, is he reverting to some of the 2018 tendencies when he was just like over Mike McCarthy, did not want to be there with McCarthy anymore? He did by all reports, basically, he did not, that relationship had gone sour. Let's just be as diplomatic about it as possible. And so there were some hero ball elements to it. And I'm going, is this what we're going to see? But then what happened the next week is Aaron Rodgers copped to it. He said, we were a little arrogant, came into the game, felt like we were going to just beat that ass. And I felt like I wasn't playing in rhythm. And I need to be more on time. I need to be more decisive. And I think it was a little rust. Remember, they hadn't played in months, basically, real football. And so what we saw, and especially against the 49ers, we talked about this week on Locked On Packers, 2.17 seconds average time to throw for Aaron Rodgers against the 49ers. And he still had almost a 10-yard average depth of target. Led the league last week in ADOT in under 2.5 seconds by 2 yards. So his ability to get the ball out quickly and still push it down the field, no other quarterbacks can do that. Tom Brady did it a little bit last year when he was taking those 3-step and go balls. No one throws. Rodgers calls it a transition go. It's a 3-step go ball. And he throws them better than anybody. You can get to the slot fade. You can get to the back shoulder throws. That stuff is suddenly back in this offense. And you're going, okay. I mean, he's made the last 2 weeks. How many wow throws has he made? The Tanyan touchdown against the Lions, earhole touchdown throw. I mean, the sideline throw on 3rd and 14 to Devontae Adams against the Lions, where he drops it just like you couldn't reach out and hand him the ball in a better situation 50 yards down the field. And we saw it again against San Francisco. A couple throws to Devontae Adams, a throw on the last drive to Devontae Adams over Fred Warner's outstretched hands. He seems dialed in now, back in this offense, playing in rhythm, getting the ball out. And that's when he's the scariest. They're going to have to do it again this week because Elton Jenkins not currently practicing. They were able to string some things together on the road against San Francisco. Can they do it, after a week of showing all the empty and all the different things? We'll see. I think Pittsburgh's going to have a plan, but everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right?
Yeah, that's usually how it goes. Mike Tyson would say that as well. I will say, though, Joe Hayden did confirm to us on Wednesday after practice that Aaron Rodgers is his favorite quarterback of all time. So that's going to be an interesting matchup when they line up against each other. But before we roll to our final segment, I wanted to ask you about the defense. Give Steelers fans a sense of what is this Packers defense strength. I know Zadarius Smith is out, but they still got plenty of talents. I really like Jair Alexander. I like Darnell Savage. There's a lot of good parts to this defense. But what is the thing that this defense bases itself in?
So, the short answer is we're still figuring it out because Joe Barry is the new defensive coordinator coming in. And what I think is interesting is we did not really know what to expect out of this defense. We assume it's going to be the Vic Fangio, Brandon Staley principles. And to be sure, a lot of quarters, a lot of tight fronts. They did some really interesting things against the 49ers where they crowded the middle on the defensive line and strung their outside, their edge players out. So it was just like, okay, you're not going to run down our throats and you're not going to spread us out and run it. So it was like the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, who's basically the preeminent run design mind in the league, he had no answers for that. So it's going to be interesting to see Pittsburgh try and attack that with Najee Harris. And then it's a lot of quarters, a lot of too high safeties, a lot of you're not going to beat us over the top. Well, if Ben doesn't want to throw over the top, now what is the counter? Is it going to be more man coverage? Is it going to be more cover 3 and saying we dare you to throw it over the top? What I have appreciated is over the last 2 weeks, they have been able to adapt and we've seen more pressure. So last week against a very good offensive line in the 49ers, they hit Jimmy G 11 times. They mixed pressure looks. They would show 6 and rush 4. They would show 4 and rush 6. And they had a 7-man pressure in the red zone that Jimmy G turned into a touchdown, just made a great play. They are going to force Ben Roethlisberger to throw with pressure in his face. And they're going to hope that he does what he did last week and throw it to the guy in the wrong colored jersey. And I think that's the force that they're going to exert on this game. They're inconsistent in the run game. I think that they're gonna give you some short passes, but they played some sticky man coverage against the 49ers and against a very talented group of receivers with Kevin King out there, out and Eric Stokes in the game. I thought the secondary played really well. The secondary is the strength of this team until Zadarius Smith gets back. And so it's an interesting strength on strength kind of thing where they're going to force you to throw underneath, and they have a great secondary, and the Steelers only throw underneath, and they've got great receivers. So it's going to be a match of strengths in that way.
It's going to be very interesting. We're going to get to more of those matchups in just a second. But first, I got to tell you all about rockauto.com. Save time and money while using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership when you can go to rockauto.com and get better prices? For example, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump can be worth $353 from the chain store, but it can be worth $216 if you just visit rockauto.com. Rock Auto is a family-owned business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could need, from brake parts to tail lamps to motor oil and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution, to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Be sure to write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today and tell them that Locked On sent you. And it's that time of the year again, as all eyes have now turned to football and teams are back on the gridiron to start the football season. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all your pro and college football action this season. You can get all the updated odds, props, and contests, and check out whatever new contests are coming out there. You can go for big money, little money, anything that floats your boat. BetOnline has, in which that you can bet on football. Head to the website right now or sign up on your mobile device to receive a 100% welcome bonus when you sign up at BetOnline. Be sure to look for all the different promos that are available. Sometimes you can get a refund on your promos. Sometimes you can get a special offer that gets you into another contest. All right available at BetOnline. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, from football to basketball to boxing, right down to horse racing. Don't wait and take advantage of all the great offers available for the 2021 season at BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. And Peter, when we do back-to-back live reads, that means we just keep it rolling here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Yeah. So I wanted to wrap things up here with you. Going over, I want each of us to list a matchup that it can be a player, it can be a position group, but it's a matchup that favors the team that we cover and favors the opposite team. So I'll go first.
Okay.
The first matchup that I think does favor the Steelers is, presuming that TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith are back, I think the best thing that they have going for them is if this pass rush can be healthy. I think that they can be a true problem for Aaron Rodgers. I know that he's a tough guy. He's a mobile guy. He can extend plays, but this is a group that when they've been out there, they make life hard for certain quarterbacks. That's my top thing going for him. I think that with the way that TJ Watt, because the other thing is, yeah, sure, they're still missing Stephon Tuitt, and Tyson Alulu now is gone as another interior defensive lineman. But when Ingram, Watt, and Highsmith are healthy, they're going to rotate those guys to the inside. They're going to move them all around and say, okay, you got to talk every single play as an offensive line group to say, okay, he's 9-0's over here, 5-6 is over here, 8's over here. We got another. And then, oh, by the way, they might send Devin Bush or Joe Schobert on a blitz up the middle. Those are the type of things that they're going to try to do to confuse Aaron Rodgers up front. This group, these guys presumably should be fresh, considering that they've missed a couple games now. And I think that could be the Steelers' best key to keep the Packers offense in check. What do you see as the biggest advantage matchup wise for the Packers?
Well, let me just flip it for a second, because that's what I was going to say, the biggest disadvantage. So I'm glad we're on the same page here. I mean, we see it the same way. I think that's going to be the biggest problem. And we don't know the status of Elton Jenkins. Didn't practice on Wednesday. Matt LaFleur said they're going to give him the full week to recover. But Josh Nijman played against Nick Bosa, I thought, pretty well after the first drive against San Francisco. Now the Packers found ways to crack and to help. And, on one of the touchdowns, it was Alan Lazard blocking Nick Bosa on the touchdown run from Aaron Jones. They had Mercedes Lewis doing it one-on-one in some rollout situations and play action situations. And there's the chips. Big Bob Tunyon laid him out on one play from the slot. So they have some answers to this, but to me, that's the biggest concern. The biggest advantage, flipping it around, is a player that you mentioned, and that is Kendrick Green on the inside. Kenny Clark has been a man possessed the last 2 weeks. He did not play his best football against the Saints. There were some flashes in there. It was one of those things where they want him to play a little bit more 3-tech and go over guards a little bit more. Mm-hmm. They made an adjustment in the second half against the Lions, and they put him back at nose, even in pass rushing situations, and said, all right, it's you against Frank Ragnow, one of the best centers in the league, and Kenny Clark ate his lunch.
Yeah, Frank Ragnow's a bad brother.
Yeah, and exactly. And you go look at the 49er tape. Alex Mack, he's on the all-decade team. Yeah. And Kenny Clark worked him a couple of times. And Kenny Clark got a pressure on Lakeland Tomlinson as well. He can beat guards or centers. I think he is that interior pressure. Quarterbacks have talked about this, from time immemorial. If you're going to pressure any quarterback, you want to do it up the middle because that is going to make them the most uncomfortable. I think Ben is the same way. And if we're being honest right now, Chris, I think in a 10-yard sprint, I think I'm taking KC over Big Ben right now.
I wouldn't argue with you. I mean, if you saw the play where he tried to throw to Derek Watt and he fell on his own face, I was sitting there like, oh,
I did see that. Yep,
man,
I did see that.
That was rough.
It was pretty good.
But yeah, it was pretty. But okay, that's totally fair. I actually agree that might be the biggest disadvantage. But I'll switch it up for our listeners because I want them to get more. One thing that I think could really play in the Packers' favor is if Ben Roethlisberger is having those problems, like I said earlier, processing the field. The Packers have some athletic guys in the secondary who can attack some passes. I talked about I love Jaire Alexander. Kevin King, an athletic guy. Eric Stokes, a good backup to have. But Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage.
Yeah,
those are two safeties that fly. They move around fast. Like if I'm the Packers, I'm looking at how Ben Roethlisberger struggles and discerning between cover 3 and cover 2 when they line up as one in pre-snap and then adjust to the other in post-snap. That's where I'm going right there. I'm saying, you guys are going to be responsible for covering a lot of ground. And if you see a ball that you think is errant, go and get it. You got to go make a play. So that's where I see the biggest disadvantage right now. That athletic secondary is going to, Ben Roethlisberger has been sure about his arm so far. This is not the greatest week to be testing a secondary against a group like the Packers.
It's not. And the secondary is playing with a lot of confidence. One of the things that stood out to me, I was watching the All-22 earlier, is in week 1, I don't think anyone had confidence in where they were going to be. And this is a new defense, and they didn't play the starters a bunch in the preseason. I thought that was a mistake. And if you're going to do that against Sean Payton, he's just going to destroy you. And he did. And whatever they did in the intervening weeks, at least by the end of the Lions game, they came out with a much better understanding of where everyone needed to be. And against the 49ers, a team, Kyle Shanahan is as good as any coach in the league at getting you to blow coverages. He knows everything about what your defense requires. And so he plays with your keys. He wants you to read a key that is not really a key. He's trying to fake you out the whole way. And they passed off crossers in zone coverage. They created space for the in-out routes in man coverage. They played so much more disciplined, frankly, than we're used to seeing them in a long time. And I think that was the really encouraging thing. Was it perfect? No. They still gave up some plays in the second half, especially helped by some absolutely ridiculous penalties. And I think what they're going to need to do that same kind of thing, because I assume that's what Pittsburgh is going to try and do. Mess with the communication, try and run some of those crossing routes, rub routes, run mesh all day, which, by the way, your offensive line has to hold up for.
Yes.
And there's going to be, Matt Canada has tried to do some relatively interesting things. The other part of this is the best tackling, one of the best tackling teams in the league right now. That's not something that you could have said for a long time if you're a Packers fan. You got to tackle Najee. And so I think that is an X factor for this in this game. If they revert to some of their previous season poor tackling ways, I think that's when suddenly, like, okay, if you're going to give Najee Harris 19 targets, it's going to work in a situation where they can't tackle him. And so that's going to be, I think, a critical factor for the Packers.
Absolutely. Peter, this is always great, man. I love being on Locked On Today with you. I love doing these shows, and finally we get to do a crossover together. So
Oh yeah.
this has been truly awesome. Peter, let our listeners know where they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Of course, Locked On Packers. Follow me on Twitter at Peter_Bukowski. Subscribe to The Leap, which is a newsletter that I do with Jason Hirschhorn every week. We're on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. Of course, Locked On Packers is there. Chris, do the same for my listeners, because I know I hear every week from people. They're doing recon. There's Packer fans listening to your shows this week.
Oh,
so
man.
be prepared.
Oh, man. Y'all scouting. I see what y'all do. I see what y'all do. My name's Chris Carter. Thanks again, Peter, for doing this with me. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques, as you see below. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to the Locked On Steelers podcast Monday through Friday, just like you listen to Locked On Packers on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can read my work at dkpittsburghsports.com. I did a film study on Ben Roethlisberger's struggles in reading the field that they released this past Wednesday. So go check that out if you want to go see some of my film studies on him. I also do work for Steeler Nation Radio and WPXI Channel 11, our local NBC affiliate here in the city of Pittsburgh. Peter, this has been great, man. I wish I was able to make the trip to Green Bay to come hang out and see that. I've never been to Wisconsin as a state, so at some point I need to check that off my list.
It's a good state. Obviously it's a great place to watch a game. You have to know that by now.
Yes.
I didn't ask you for a prediction, but we should probably make one quickly as we're winding down here. I like the Packers 27-20.
I got Packers 24-19. There's gonna be a weird score somewhere. There's gonna be
a couple weird field goals. I like it.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking, my initial thought was like 24-16 or something weird like that. 20.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you. I'm into it. It's gonna be I think it's gonna be a great game, honestly.
I think it's gonna be exciting.
So I can't wait for it, and we'll talk soon, man.
Absolutely.